Hello, everybody. If you're joining us, I see that we have a participant or two trickling in. So we'll start off. My name is Kate Edelson. I am the Outreach and Volunteer Coordinator at NAMI Miami. Thank you so much for joining us during Unity Week. I am joined here today by Teresa McGee and Dr. Theodore Treese. Today we're going to be discussing Teresa's film, The Gardener, which we would have shown in our 2020 film festival had everything gone according to plan. And Dr. Treese will be talking about the mental health condition from the film after the film. And so Teresa, she'll be sharing some words as well. For those of you that don't know, part of the reason why we're doing the showing of the film is for Unity Week in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month and our first ever mental health walk that is taking place this Saturday, May 22nd. We'll be meeting in a few different spots. If you haven't registered, it's not too late. You can still join the walk. It's at namiwalks.org/Miami. I can put it in the chat in case anyone is interested in registering. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and show the film. We're very excited to see it, and we'll have a little panel discussion afterwards.
Alec.
Coming. Just a sec.
Looks good. I meant to mention, I hired somebody to help with the yard. I mean, they're not going to bother you up here.
Yeah, I know. Totally fine. This needs pepper. You want some?
Sure. Yeah, just a shake.
Alec, is that you?
Dahlia?
I thought you were living in LA.
I am. I do. I'm just visiting my uncle for a few days and working. A working holiday.
Yeah, I heard Netflix bought some of your shit.
They use a few pieces. Mostly short, but a couple of longer ones for, the longer scenes.
Cool. I'm gonna take a break. Come down here. This is crazy.
I'm actually waiting for a phone call. We're working out, details. It'll take a while. There it is. Gotta go. Talk soon.
Okay.
You're making headway?
I think so.
Are you still doing your poetry? Your notebook poems. You used to read them to me.
And you actually listened.
What's in it today?
Come down here and I'll read you one.
Conference call part 2, unfortunately.
Okay, fine. I'll read you one because you asked. We have futility. That's a depressing one. Why people buzz in mosquitoes' ears. Dangerously awake.
Dangerously awake.
Mr. Justice. Justice for who? Big oil, big government? You're minions on the 15th hole. So you sentenced 70-year-olds to 7 days in prison for protecting the water, life, their grandchildren. A deterrent, you say. So we're just going to let skanky CEOs poison the planet with their tankers and pipelines and cynicism? Get it so hot we were wishing we were in a damn prison cell. Seeing women being carted off to jail, that is a deterrent. To sitting on the couch, to letting you decide our future. Our future. I'll see you in courtroom 35B. Respectfully, always, D.
So you're gonna get arrested?
Unfortunately, the actions are on Tuesday when I'm working and Saturday morning when I have my Pilates class, so...
So you're getting dangerously toned instead?
For now. Bye, Alec!
Bye, Dahlia. Let me offer you a refreshing beverage.
Uncle Mark? Hey.
Hey, yourself! You good with 2?
Yeah, I'm good.
Hey, you got a key to the basement? Your uncle was supposed to... Never mind.
Your gardener was assaulting me.
Okay.
If I was trying to assault you, plum pits would not be my weapon of choice.
Don't think I haven't noticed you stockpiling those green clubs.
Yeah, you might want to sleep with the light on.
Sometimes you don't have to cook it. Sometimes you can just, like, if you look in here.
You're working late?
Yeah. Fireworks tomorrow. I'm gonna try to finish early and get a good spot. You can watch them from here. You should invite me.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I might not be here.
Where exactly are you gonna be? Ow. Shit. I got stung. Alec!
Where's your EpiPen?
In my car? Shit, it's not there. Address!
227 West 6th. I have an EpiPen. Dahlia, she got stung. She's allergic. It's bad. 5 minutes. Okay. Five minutes. 5 minutes.
Are you okay?
How is she?
She's coming around her, taking her line skate.
Hi, Alec. I'm Mary.
Hi.
You're in control, Alec. You only go as far as you want and stay as long as you like.
Dahlia. I never lived in LA. I moved in with my uncle 5 years ago because I had an anxiety disorder.
Okay, thanks for showing it.
Oh, it's such a beautiful film.
Oh, thank
It's
you.
been a while since I watched it all
Oh
the
yeah,
way.
I got a little bit choked up with one of the parts. I haven't seen it for a while either. The actor that plays Uncle Mark is just amazing.
They're all amazing.
They're all amazing. They're all amazing. But that scene where he just the simple scene where they're having dinner together. And,
Take it away, Teresa.
yeah, well, that to me is the crux of it, right? Is that, you know, anxiety or any mental health disorder kind of just robs you of life, right? Of experiences. And I think we're all experiencing it with COVID, right? We can't have our regular experiences that we're used to having. But if, you know, if you have anxiety or agoraphobia, you know, that's your life. And I wanted the character to, you know, for him to have had it for quite a while. You know, he says, you know, he's down in LA writing music for Netflix. And you get the sense that he's been dealing with this for quite some time. And I don't know what the stats are for how long people put up with, you know, anxiety and their mental health disorders. But I know for myself, I've had like various anxiety issues through the years, and always had them for way too long before I went for help. And I mean, you know, when you go for help and you think, oh, you know, why didn't I do this sooner? It's just crazy. But you know, I think things are changing now a bit because, you know, people, it is okay to admit that you're struggling with anxiety or depression or addiction, whatever it might be. So that's good. And your festival, you know, your walk, everything you're doing is just, you know, making it that much more acceptable for people to talk about it even. And that's the first thing, you know, being able to talk about it. So with the film, I wanted to just contrast, you know, Dahlia, she's like full of enthusiasm and full of life. And you know, and he's okay, he's kind of just existing, but he's missing out. I don't know what the quote was, but there's two things that make us change, either inspiration or desperation, right? And so I think he has a bit of both here. He has, you know, he's inspired by her, and he's also, you know, desperate because he, for the first time, you know, he knows what he's missing out on, right? And those are the hard moments, right? When you realize when you're suffering from something, you know, that you're missing out on life. You're being robbed of life that you really want for yourself, right? So that was kind of a big thing for me to show. I wanted to have a male main character. I have 6 brothers, a lot of brothers, a lot of drama in my family. And I know how much more difficult it is for them to talk about their feelings. And one of my brothers just had a traumatic incident recently, and he scuba dives for sea urchins and things like that. And one of his deckhands drowned, and he had to go down and get him and try to bring him back to life. And the diver was 25 and he died. And it was very, very traumatic for my brother. And he obviously he had PTSD. So finally he went to get some help after, suffering for months. And he said to me, I used to think those, those therapists were quacks, they're the counselors. I didn't see how useful, they would be. But honestly, I mean, this woman was so good. And I think it really helped him with other issues he's had all his life. But it took this one serious incident for him to go get help. And I think for men, that sometimes, unfortunately, what happens is something serious happens and that leads them to get help, right? Well, women too, but it's more acceptable for women to go get help. The other thing I wanted to show was the Uncle Mark and how, when we do have loved ones who are suffering, how helpless we feel. So the Uncle Mark was, I've seen that look on my dad. I've seen it on different people, and myself included, when you just don't know what to do, right? So you're suffering right along with that person. So some things I say to people, myself too, is, get yourself well, because if you're well, then, that influences everybody around you, right? The whole family. So that was another thing that was important. Yeah, I think, like I said, I really benefited from, I waited too long to get help for my anxiety issues. I had multiple. And then I also did a lot of reading. I love podcasts, but there just really is so much great help out there right now. So I hope, thank you that, people are watching this and becoming more aware all the time. So hopefully we'll make some changes, as we go forward.
Absolutely. Thank you. If anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Tell us, how long ago did you film The Gardener? How long has it been?
I think it was 2018. And then
Okay.
I edited it myself, so it was a long time editing.
You edited?
I edited it myself because I wanted to teach myself editing. So
Wow.
It took me a long time. And then I like picking the music and I worked with a colorist, and I like that part of filmmaking is working with all the different professionals, right?
Right.
That's fun.
Very cool. And so the inspiration was drawn upon from your own experience for the most part?
Experience, I have a loved one who undiagnosed, and he has OCD and he's a hermit. So I think there's a bit of agoraphobia in there.
Gotcha.
He said to me, "That wasn't about me, was it? The film?" And I was like, "Oh no, oh no." Yeah, and then also, to be honest with you, I wanted something I could shoot in a house, and and I had my garden that was right for the. So I wrote the story around what I had available to me. But you can bring in all those different elements with agoraphobia. It's the same with anxiety. It's there's a lot of the same dynamics happen with any kind of human suffering, right?
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Beautiful. Thank you so much. So again, if anyone has any more questions, feel free to put them in the chat, but I'm going to let Dr. Treese from Siegel Trials, who has joined us here tonight, take over. He has some information to share with us. So without further ado, all you, Dr. Treese.
Thanks, Kate, and thanks, Teresa, for the film. It was beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
And as far as Uncle Mark, I want to talk more about the characters as I introduce some topics. But it really was interesting how you could see in very subtle ways where he loved Alec, he supported him, but sometimes he was frustrated and confused.
Right.
And so it was really, really, it was so detailed. And the chair by Alec's door, because you just know that he must have spent a lot of time sitting there.
Yeah.
Because Alec wouldn't let him in.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, we'll talk more about different parts as we go. I'm going to share my screen, and I've got a little PowerPoint. And the purpose of the PowerPoint is to, actually, let me just pause here and figure out how to share my screen. There we go.
There you
There
go.
we go. It's a miracle. So it's about, so the presentation I have prepared is to talk about the basics of agoraphobia, excuse me, and then introduce this new idea of COVID anxiety, which it can look a little bit like, or a lot like agoraphobia. And to just talk about how those things are similar, how they come from similar places in people, and then talk about some of the differences and how you can tell them apart. And then just to, talk more about the film and the characters and how these characters brought this topic to life, and then just some very basics on treatment. Mainly, I wanted to focus this talk kind of off the slides to just help, the lay public just understand this disorder, because it's so confusing, the diagnosis. And if we can bring it to a little bit more life and a little more detail there, it would be helpful. Because with agoraphobia or OCD, like Treese was saying, they're very similar. It's so confusing, even to the person going through it, and for those watching, those trying to help. It just doesn't make any sense from the vantage point we're usually at until you kind of get into the mind a little bit more. So that's the idea. So the basics are, there's a fear of situations where the person, the individual suffering, doesn't feel like they can have guaranteed control of a situation. And so as the person gets outside of familiarity, like Alec, when he had to go outside the house, you could see the dread, and you could even see the panic symptoms too that were happening with him. That takes place. And like with Alec, it's debilitating. The poor guy was, he might even meet disability criteria. His productivity must have been badly limited. And then, like we were just talking, the others, the family, the loved ones, are confused. They just don't understand. And so they try their best. And I think if we had more time with the film, then, if more things would play out, you'd see where the frustration would be more, and also the love and the support would be more too. Just very wide swings and the mixed feelings people can have trying to help people. But one of the key things about agoraphobia is that the uncertainty or the danger is more in the mind. And if you ask the person, well, what is it? What are you worried about? They really struggle. They really have a hard time putting it into words. And we'll talk more about why that is. I'll pause there for a minute. Any questions so far?
There was one question. Yeah. This might be, here we are. Okay. What advice would you give to folks who are having trouble reconnecting with normal life after a year of isolation at home? I know you're going to get into a little bit more of the similarities. And also, thank you, Dr. Treese, Siegel Trials. You do such amazing work, and our community is grateful to you for lifting up this important issue.
Oh, thanks, Kate. It's our pleasure. So the question was, how do you reconnect? And yeah, I'm going to think about that as I go through a couple more slides, and I'm going to come back to that question. How do you reconnect after you've been sort of imprisoned or stranded for a while, for a long period of time? So we'll come back to that. But I appreciate the question. Here are some basic things about it, basic things that could be precipitating factors or causative in the disorder, and also things that just go along with it. Like Teresa mentioned, other disorders are common. Agoraphobia rarely happens just by itself. Usually it comes with panic. It could be with OCD or other anxiety disorders, even PTSD, and depression and things like that, mood disorders in general. So it's usually can be sometimes just the tip of the iceberg. And a lot of times you have many different stories or reasons why people feel the way they feel. Something I didn't actually know until I made this slide deck is these folks have limited spatial awareness. Somehow I didn't know that until now. That means they've got limited capacity with things like balance, depth perception. They've got a hard time physically experiencing the world around them. And so that's really interesting, because there's other awarenesses that are lacking too, like emotional unawareness. So maybe something gets halted. in development. And in the next bullet point is where it could happen is with childhood trauma, just a severe loss. Sexual abuse can be somewhat more common in people with agoraphobia. Just stressful events in general. Alcohol and drug use goes back to, it sort of goes hand in hand with the biological factors, which I kind of skipped over. Basically, if someone has a biological vulnerability, if they're more reactive physically to stress, if they tend to sweat or have more labile blood pressure, heart rate in response to stress, then they could be more sensitive to these kind of stressors that lead down this path in the first place. And so that's why it's an interaction between all this. Alcohol and drug use can also cause physical reactions to stressors. For example, someone's in a state of withdrawal, or if they're intoxicated from a drug, they can be more prone to feel terrified or frightened by something that really wouldn't merit that otherwise. For example, if someone takes a certain type of marijuana or maybe cocaine use, they can be more vulnerable. Now, the abusive relationship that I mentioned here has to do with, when someone's going through an abusive relationship, sometimes they feel pressure to just avoid the outside world. Sometimes the abusive relationship might involve having to have that relationship exposed, and they'd rather not do that. So within the abusive relationship, it's one of those co-occurring things. And it's hard to put just one reason for why that is, but it's just something you'll see as you do assessments, as you work with people going through this. So with COVID anxiety, basically what happens here is, the key difference is, well, first of all, you could have somebody who might have mild agoraphobia, and then when COVID comes out, the pandemic starts about a year ago, then that really just puts them over the top and they can really suffer. Also, you might have somebody who might have been just a mild germ, somebody who's, phobic to germs and things like that, was, a strict hand washer and, didn't really want to shower in the locker room at the gym. They want to come home and shower. That kind of is a normal trait, more or less. But with COVID, that person can appear, agoraphobic after things really get going by last March in 2020. But with COVID-19, in this situation, unknowns can blur the line between rational and irrational fears. So what I mean by unknowns is when COVID first happened, when the pandemic first really reached America, at least when we became aware of it, we didn't know much of anything about it. And so then all of a sudden, anything looks frightening. Taking a flight was terrifying for people, even back in January of 2020. And so that's what happens is not only people can feel pretty reassured, pretty safe, but then when you introduce something that looks terrifying, then all of a sudden we could feel afraid of everything. Somebody who had been previously high functioning. And then if you throw in all the loss that began to occur, like economic loss, and we lost a lot of people during COVID. I myself know a good 5 or 6 people or more who passed away. And so all these things start to add up and it becomes a lot more frightening. So, but one distinction that's really important with COVID anxiety, here the uncertainty in the outside world is much more realistic, more tangible, easy to define. And so you can look at it and know what it is. And you may not know much about it, like COVID back in March 2020, but at least you can point to something. With somebody with agoraphobia, a lot of times it's going to take you a long time to get anything close to a straight answer on what exactly they're worried about. I'm going to pause here for a minute. Any other questions so far?
I just want to ask about the uncertainty thing. That was what hit me, because we all of us have kind of gone up and down, right, over the past year and a bit. But I started to kind of really worry about the future, and I hadn't had that fear for a long time. Is that something that a lot of people are going to you for help for? Is just worrying about the future?
I think so. And care to share any more about it, or like
Oh,
any particular
well,
specific?
no, it was an old kind of thing I thought I dealt with. That's the thing is the things that I thought I'd nicely packed away and dealt with kind of bubbled up during this time for me. I remember a big one for me going through my life was always that I felt that the other shoe was always going to drop. That feeling of dread, right? And it wasn't until I kind of keyed in with some help, right, professional help, that was the underlying thought that I was having, that, you know, because for a while there in my life, the other shoe did drop. There was a lot of stuff going on. But then when the stuff kind of leveled out, there wasn't a lot of the, you know, the hard stuff had already passed. I was still operating under that, with that thought that the other shoe is going to drop. And you always have to be on guard, kind of, you know, hyper vigilant. But I found during COVID, those kind of feelings and thoughts, I guess, behind the feelings were bubbling up in me. And yeah, I've talked to other friends who also had similar experiences where things that, you know, they thought they dealt with and feelings and, you know, anxieties were, you know, coming to the surface that they thought they dealt with a long time ago. So I can just really feel for people who already are going through a rough time and having this, you know, on top of everything. You know,
I appreciate you mentioning all that, and as you talk about it, it resonates with me and people I work with too, because when normally we're all sort of doing a little bit of work to sort of hold things in check. We've all got some fears that are normal. You know, myself thinking about my son, his future, ups and downs he faces in school that are normal for a kid, that normally I could feel it's okay. But then when COVID comes along, and then it unleashes many unrealistic or uncertainties. Like, for example, in the medical field, I know lots of physicians who had to shut down their offices. And even in research, we were fortunate with the state of Florida. You know, our sites didn't get shut down because we were able to maintain a certain status with medical necessity and whatnot. And we were able to stay open. But it just, basically, when you deal with something really, really severe like a pandemic, and it goes on for so long, then it becomes, we become a little bit fatigued. Our stamina for dealing with the other things we're sort of holding in place get a little tired, and we kind of lose our breath, so to speak. And I think that's what that does happen. So to answer your question, absolutely, it unleashes all the other worries too. As far as, you know, for the loved ones, it's important just to listen to them and give time without expectation. And I think in the film, that was clear. You could see where, especially with Uncle Mark, with Dahlia, I just don't think she knew enough about what was going on. But with Uncle Mark, he was so patient. And so, because the reason why is because the loved one is frightened of something that's just not visible, even to the one who's struggling with it, especially in the beginning. It just doesn't make any sense to them. As I was preparing these slides, I was remembering when I was in the military, I was in the Marine Corps, and we all have to show that we can swim because we're part of the Navy, and we could be on ships. And surprisingly, in the recruiting and the basic training phase, we found that about maybe 2 or 3% of the guys didn't know how to swim. And it was the strangest thing because I grew up in South Florida, always around the water. But trying to teach these boys at 18 or 19 years old how to swim, it's just too late in life. I mean, it's too late in life to learn how to swim in a more natural, comfortable way. It was terrible. And so we all talked with each other, and they couldn't say what they were worried about, but they just knew they were terrified. And it was the strangest thing. But the thing is, that's how I was sort of associating to that and looking at the film and preparing this, because that's the thing is they don't know what they're worried about, but they know it's something really rough. And so that's where it comes into play, is just taking an empathic focus. The tendency or the temptation is to say, just snap out of it, or to be like Dahlia, come on down. And it's, that's just the way it is. She wants to see him, and she didn't know what was going on. But Uncle Mark knew, and I think he did what is in the third slide here. He just took a balanced approach. He sort of waited around. He loved him, he took care of him, and but he gave a little push. I thought the look he gave him when he was standing over Dahlia sort of helped emphasize that it's time to do something. But the point I'm making here is there's a dilemma the person's facing, is they feel safer staying in the room like Alec was, but they know they're imprisoned and stranded, versus getting help but living with the uncertainty. In other words, challenging it and dealing with that. So you could say it in a way, well, on the one hand, it's hard to be alone. On the other hand, it's hard to get out there and try something, or, sort of like for you to get help, it's going to hurt. Things like that. I know it sounds clinical, but if you can frame the dilemma for them, it just helps them go where they need to go. Because if we push, if I was to say if I was one of the characters, I might say, Alec, my temptation could be, you're losing too much, you got to get back to work. But what's going to happen is he's going to bolster himself on the other side, and he's just going to defend the pathologic position, or the more stranded position. Or if you, same thing on the other side, if you encourage him to stay in, he's going to feel frustrated in the other direction. But I wonder, does that make sense? Because the thing is, we just can't do it for them. And if we could tell them what to do, this wouldn't even be a disorder. If we could tell people to get over it, so to speak. We just have to sit there and be available, as unconditional as we can be, and then challenge at the right moment. And I thought the look Mark gave Alec from the garden up to the window was a little bit of a punctuation mark on what Alec already felt. He knew that he was so upset about leaving her down there and then just running down there and running back up, that was his moment of like desperation, where he realized, okay, this is it. I can't go on like this anymore. And Mark was the punctuation mark. And so he waited, and he did it right. I think he did it as well as you can do for a family member. Like I've already alluded to, you can't talk them out of their fear. But on the other hand, with COVID anxiety, education and talking about the situation will help. That's for somebody who's not necessarily suffering with agoraphobia, but maybe something got activated, like Treese was saying. Maybe a pandemic can activate other fears, and you get a cascade of just general fear and anxiety and desperation. If you provide education, then the person's going to feel relieved and restored, and then they can sort of put everything back in place that they're worried about. So that's the difference. With agoraphobia, you can't talk them out of it. You got to help them find their own narrative. With COVID anxiety, you just educate them as much as you can, and things will get better. Even now, you see with COVID, now our big questions are, is it safe to travel if I've got the vaccine? Am I going to hurt my loved ones? Before, we didn't know if we could leave the house. And so it was very much unknown in the beginning.
We do have a couple of questions from Cernovia, and I apologize, my dog is playing with something here in the corner. But it's the questions from Cernovia. Do you think, sorry about that. Do you think anxiety levels will remain the same or lower as businesses return to full opening? And additionally, is the movie a short or part of a larger piece?
What was the last part? Part of a shorter or?
Yes, that second question I think was for Teresa. It was, is the movie a short or part of a larger piece?
Oh, well, it's far.
It is a short. Although I would love to make a feature one day, but for now it's a short. Yes. And
from the psychiatrist's point of view, obviously, you can only cover so much in a short film. There are many more steps that one could go into, and so what Treese and I were joking about in the beginning is you could spend hours on the topic and talk about all the many steps, and that's kind of what this goes into, this next slide here. But Kate, the second question for me was, do I see the anxiety levels staying high? And I think that's just an individual question but for someone diagnosed with agoraphobia, well, again, I think it's also just an individual question. Depends on what their fears are related to as they develop. But with agoraphobia, I think in the near term, I'd expect those folks to struggle a bit more. And it's hard to say how much, but the short answer is I'd say it's going to be a bit higher for those with agoraphobia or anxiety disorders in general. And then the other question was about the short piece. Now, as far as the first question about, we've only got about 10 minutes left. I want to make sure I cover this question. The other question had to do with reconnecting. And this kind of goes into these last two slides. Reconnecting after a long period of time away, I think a lot of it depends on, what's the nature of how things broke off. But I think if I was in that position, I think I would just be honest and explain what happened. And so the hard part of this would be, well, how do you be honest? Honest about what? And I think the person, when someone gets into a more recovered state from agoraphobia, I think they're going to have things a bit more figured out. And so I'm going to come back into just a second. Like in the slide here, the danger comes into play with a mix of unfavorable biologic vulnerability and also psychological exposure, whether it be trauma, loss, or even just someone who's harsh. And what it tends to do is if these tendencies, these coping, these personality traits that can lend itself to this kind of a diagnosis later on in teens or young adulthood, it happens if someone has really harsh, aggressive, or even just a traumatic event or harsh parenting or something like that, it really can stifle their development in their formative years. And so like a rough analogy would be if someone, say a 3 or 4 year old, 5-year-old burns their hand on the stove, it's not exactly this way, but they might not know what the stove was, but in the future, they might just be worried about anything made out of metal, or they might be afraid of anything that's silver or a box. So their ability to perceive and discern the environment is limited, and their ability for memory is a little bit limited too. And so they sort of block out large facets, large aspects of their reality and the world around them. And so it sort of teaches them to just retreat and just block off large segments of their experience and then they sort of stop discerning. And so that's how it plays out. That's how it sort of builds. The disorder in this case can build for more of a pure agoraphobia. And so when you go in treatment, this goes from everything from nutrition, reduction of alcohol and drugs, if that's a problem, sorting out personal lives, getting all this stuff in control. And to give you an example, like with nutrition, if someone just starts eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, reduces processed foods, and then of course the alcohol and drug control too, even that alone is going to have a huge impact on just reducing, restoring health in a general way. But then going forward and getting into the mental health treatment part, you need a multidisciplinary approach. And what that means is try anything that'll work that's peer-reviewed and reputable treatment, whether it be exposure therapies, more of a general psychotherapy, a supportive psychotherapy, medication treatment. If you want to reduce the biological vulnerability, you can reduce their anxiety state from a physical level and maybe prepare them for the more psychological part. But what you'll do in exposure therapies, as they gradually, like the Marine guy who couldn't swim, maybe let him sit on the steps for a few months or maybe a year and let them just sort of wade in waist deep water for a while. And little by little, as you expose the person with agoraphobia to what they were, to the outside world, they're going to develop themes that are going to come to their awareness, and they'll talk about it in the therapies that they can go through, and they're going to develop their narrative. So if it was me, if I was the one suffering with agoraphobia, knowing what I know about treatment, and having gone through a fair amount myself as a professional and is taking care of myself, I'd feel challenged. And if they're a true friend and if there's somebody worth connecting to, I would just be open about it. And I mean, I know some things are harder than others. For example, if it's related to, say, a trauma that you don't really want to talk about with everybody, but there are different ways you can sort of couch that. And so I would just explain it. So I had a situation where I was stressed out. I had some unrealistic fears, and it made me kind of block off the whole world, or at least large parts of my world for a while. And so it definitely, this was all mostly in my mind, in my past, and it had nothing to do with you, whether it be a business contact, an education contact, or a friend, maybe somebody I wanted to have an intimate relationship with that I broke off. I think that would be a fair way to do it, because chances are, if something was, when your communications broke off, or the one suffering from the diagnosis, when they had to kind of retreat, people know something happened anyways. And if they don't know, they're going to find out eventually. And so you might as well just tell them. But understandably, there's many different ways you can go about this, and there are plenty of reasons not to do it this way, and there are plenty of ways to do it this way. But I think the important thing is just take an authentic approach, and then talk to your team, talk to the people treating you, and your family too, whoever you can trust. Another thing here about the treatment is with the limited awareness, the spatial awareness, the emotional awareness, all those things start to come back, or actually maybe start to develop. Now, nothing develops like a child's mind or a teenager's mind, but even as adults, you can still find some flexibility and the ability to kind of have some neuroplasticity, as we say in mental health, or just cognitive flexibility, mental flexibility to learn and to grow these abilities back. Because what you want to do is just realize and develop the ability to accurately discern and perceive the world around us, so we can make our own judgments with better trust in ourselves. And let me see if there's, like I said here, broad generalizations. The person broadly blocked out the world, or most of it. You want to fill that emptiness or that vagueness in with specific detail and narrative, so they can explain it to themselves, eventually explain it to others. And with agoraphobia, like I said, internal awareness through treatment brings freedom. They learn about the uncertainty within themselves. With COVID anxiety, education about the external threat with supportive treatment, just very basic treatment, is usually going to be helpful enough, unless you uncover something else. But I'm going to stop there for a minute and just see if we can have a few minutes for questions and more discussion.
Thank you. So we have a couple of comments. One for Teresa. I love the film. It was so real and honest. Thank you, Teresa, for making such an important film. This will help us open the door to honest conversation. And then going back to COVID. Okay. Teresa and Dr. Treese, what should employers do to help their employees readjust to going back to the office? We have been at home, comfortable in our sweatpants, called me out, working with our dogs and cats on our laps, another call out. Going back into commuting traffic and office filled with people and activity will be hard for others. I know it's hard to think about this for me. Should NAMI Miami consider return to work programs? That was a long one. I can repeat it if you need me to.
I don't feel qualified to answer that, but I mean, I think I used to love those goofy, get to know you kind of activities that you would do with your staff, and they're kind of hokey, but
icebreakers.
Icebreakers, and it just relaxes everybody. I mean, I've had a few female principals in my day, and they were always really good at that, and I think that's very valuable to spend some time doing things like that. Not just go, we're back at work.
As if nothing happened, which
nothing happened.
Is not the case.
Yeah,
Exactly.
But Dr. Treese probably has more specifics.
No, I appreciate it, Teresa, and like some of the other participants mentioned, we love the film. It really brought the whole thing to life. And with the experience I have with this type of a situation, living in Florida my whole life, or most of my life, we deal with hurricanes, especially a lot more lately over the past 10, 15 years, over most of my professional life. And so I worked a lot in the past as a psychotherapist, working clinically with people. And these are people that came every week, sometimes multiple times a week. And when there's the aftermath of a hurricane, or even leading up to the hurricane, when the preparation takes place, people are very panicked over a short amount of time. And although it's very different than the pandemic, the pandemic's like a marathon. and different types of fears in play, where the hurricane is like a sprint. But what I had to do, both as an employer of having some employees at times, and as somebody leading treatments, is to, this was a time to be flexible. Now, the way my work goes is a lot of ways very much like a personal trainer in athletics, where you have to challenge the people to come in every week. And even if there's audiovisual, because I was doing audiovisual treatments, 15 years ago when Skype was still fairly new. But the bottom line is, the thing is, there's a time to relax the treatment, and there's a time to hold people firm and really call them out when they try to make up reasons not to come into treatment or come to work. But when there's a hurricane aftermath, or with this is so different, but in many ways more frightening. What I find is that I really needed to recognize the fear, pay respect to it, and this was not the time to be rough with people and rigid. My experience was, both with employees and with patients, if I was to, like, for example, my cancellation fee was always very firm. If people missed appointments, they're going to pay. But with hurricane, I would sort of relax that. I would try to find a way to meet by phone, sometimes even nighttime, because everything was different. When there's no power, we're scrambling to find phones that work, or whatever the case may be. So the long story short is, and one last thing I want to say was the loyalty and the gratitude and the appreciation and the growth that I saw in the people I worked with was returned tenfold, and it was felt. It really touched their lives, because they felt like I understood. And now there's always some that are going to take advantage, but what are you going to do? But I find the vast majority were not doing that. And if they were, you could tell pretty easily. And with the pandemic, I think what I see a lot of companies doing so far, some of whom I consult with, in these type of situations, they're basically gradually bringing people back. For example, in the legal system, court system, some folks are just doing hybrid type settings where some of the court or some of the proceedings take place in person, and then some of it is still going to be audiovisual for a while, because the courts, the employers, they recognize that people have gotten used to homeschooling, that they need to be home for their kids. Some of the kids aren't even back to school fully. So it really requires some flexibility. So short answer is, I think it's best to be flexible and to be as empathic as possible. And this is not the time to be, more Catholic than the Pope. It's time to just relax and just take it slow.
Beautifully said, Dr. Treese. So we are over time, so we are going to end things here. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to email me, Kate with a K at namimiami.org. I can email Teresa or Dr. Treese with your questions if they're specific to either one of them. I'd like to thank you both so much again for joining us tonight during our Unity Week for Mental Health Awareness Month, before our first ever mental health walk. It has been such a pleasure. Teresa, I love the film. Like I said, when we were initially planning on showing this at the film festival, all of our judges spoke volumes about it. We all loved it. It is such a joy to watch, and you really feel for the characters. I think that really happens automatically when you watch it. So thank you so much for joining us. And then thank you, Dr. Treese, and to Seagull Trials. Oh, there goes my dog. For supporting us, for participating in this evening. It was really wonderful. And last plug, May 22nd is our walk. It's this Saturday. Please register namiwalks.org/Miami. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out or call us at 305-665-2540. Actually, we have someone here who was a volunteer judge for our film festival. Hi, Michelle. I hope you're doing well. So again, thank you all very much. Have a great night. Tomorrow we have NAMI 101 on the same Zoom link as this one. So if anyone would like to learn more about what we've been doing, what we've done since COVID, what we're doing in the future, if you'd just like to meet the team or learn more about NAMI, please join us tomorrow at 7 p.m. So thank you all very much and have a great night.
Have a great walk.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thanks, it was a pleasure.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you both.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah.